So welcome everybody to this webinar this afternoon, what SUNY faculty need to know about adopting, adapting, or creating open educational resources. My name is Chris Price. I'm the Academic Programs Manager at the SUNY Center for Professional Development, which is in Syracuse, but I'm joining you today from my basement in Rochester, New York, obviously. I want to acknowledge my colleagues from the other sponsoring organizations here, Mike Daly from SUNY OER Services and Tim Stooksbury from SUNY Press, 64 Inc. there on the slide here. I also want to point out that we are recording this, obviously, and we will share the recording in the slide deck with everyone who registered. You'll also notice too at the bottom of the screen that there's a live transcript now, live subtitles it's integrated in Zoom. So if you'd like to have the captions on, you just have to click on that. And there's actually, if you click a little arrow next to it, you can see a running list of all the transcript as it happens in the chat side of the screen. So thankfully, Zoom has integrated that right into the meeting rooms now. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction. I'll go over the agenda a bit here. After this welcome, we'll hear from Josh Dickinson, Associate Professor at English at Jefferson Community College, and then we'll go to Jamie Murphy, who is Associate Professor of School of Nursing at SUNY Delhi, and then Susan Oakes, who's Professor of School of Arts and Humanities at SUNY Empire State. And then last, Teresa Burke, instructor of Allied Health and Biological Science. This is at Dutchess Community College. And then with whatever time, we'll address any questions you have for the presenters. Since we do have a pretty full slate of presenters, I think we're going to hold all the questions until the end. But if you put your questions in the chat, I will make sure that the presenters get them at the end. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet now, and I guess turn it over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody, and welcome for joining us today. As Chris said in the introduction, my name is Mike Daly. I'm Director of Operations for SUNY OER Services. I'm going to run through a very brief definition of OER, what OER Services is, with the caveat that should you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to oer@suny.edu. Myself or my colleague Tony DeFranco are always happy to talk about how OER can be considered as a choice for all SUNY faculty as they dig into what curricular materials might best support the student learning that they're after in their courses. So open educational resources, a quick definition here from the Hewlett Foundation that came out about 2000 or 2001, are really teaching and learning and research resources that reside either in the public domain or have been released under intellectual property license. Generally, that's considered a Creative Commons license. There's some other caveats that permit their free use and repurposing by others. They include full course materials, modules, textbooks, streaming videos, test software, and any other tools, materials, or techniques used to support direct access to knowledge. Very quick definition. Really, the key thing to remember there is that OER exists because of their licenses, whether they're in the public domain or they have a Creative Commons license. So OER really exists because of the license. If you're interested in learning more about kind of OER, how the licenses define OER, we certainly have community courses that are free and available to take for anybody who's willing. And the link is on this slide, but we have a resource link at the end of this deck that we'll share out with you as well. I think it's also important to dig a little more deeply and understand what OER does and doesn't equal. And though our faculty presenters, for the most part, will discuss the ways in which they've utilized OER in digital formats, OER is not synonymous with digital. OER can and does, as Tim Stooksbury from the SUNY Press will talk about shortly, cross format boundaries that can be available in print or offline content quite frequently. And as I mentioned in the last slide, OER is based on the license attached to an item. Textual item, an audio item, a visual item, an audio-visual item, an interactive element. Accessing that item in a way that is most beneficial to you or your students may incur a cost. Thus, OER does not always equal free. What OER does always equal to is free to use with permissions. SUNY's curated collection of OER resources or OER courses, I use that term broadly because you can break these apart and reuse them in ways that work best for you, is available at oer.suny.edu. There you'll find over 100 openly licensed courses that are geared at high enrollment general education courses. SUNY has been involved with supporting the adoption, creation of open educational resources in various ways, really since about 2010, 2011. OER Services was launched in 2017 as a function of SUNY's Office of Library and Information Services, or OLIS, and our current operations are really focused on directly supporting SUNY campuses and faculty who are interested in choosing open educational resources as content, while at the same time successfully lowering the cost of learning materials and increasing student success. Our catalog is a partnership with Lumen Learning and Carnegie Mellon University's Open Learning Initiative, or OLI, which offers no-cost access, as I said, to well over 100 courses aligned with SUNY's current general education standards and outcomes. You are free to preview this catalog, use any of this material at any time that you want to. It's available at oer.suny.edu. That's my cursor. 1 second. For those who choose to do so, to choose the resources and course materials on that site as learning materials for their courses, or in your tutoring center or in a placement center, or more recently, we're seeing individuals associated with economic opportunity programs or economic opportunity centers. The following benefits are available to you also at no cost. The content you'll find is openly licensed. It's peer-reviewed content. It's continuously updated. SUNY faculty always have the opportunity to customize that content to meet their specific course needs, to talk about content the way that they talk about it in their class. There's ancillary materials, so slides, test banks, etc. Always a choice to use those if you want to. Those are also openly licensed, so you can revise and remix those as you see fit. There is compliance and beyond of accessibility standards. This is certainly important in a time of remote and hybrid and high flex learning. Having a universal design and material that is accessible by all is certainly important. As I said earlier, I'll say again, all these materials are at no cost to SUNY faculty and students, and they allow for seamless integration with all the learning management systems used across SUNY, so Blackboard, Moodle, etc. To answer questions about what other OER content is there, Mike, I teach a non-gen ed course at the 300, 400 level, or I teach a course that's not addressed readily in the catalog. Let's talk. Feel free to email oer@suny.edu at any time to schedule a consultation on what openly licensed options are available for you to review. At the same time we have that conversation, we'll also ask, what supports are available for that other content? Is there compliance with accessibility? So we'll always bring these reminders up. And sometimes we might have a very frank conversation with you that says, you're doing amazing things in your class using the materials you're already using. Don't stop. Tell your story more broadly. One response we often hear from faculty considering using OER is that they aren't eager to embrace a heavy lift of creating the entirety of their course's content from scratch or on their own. Our Ready to Adopt catalog is really designed in part to address some of those concerns and potential barriers. As you dig into the catalog, you'll see mention of 4 unique platforms. I'm not going to spend much time talking about Waymaker and OLI. There's more focused webinars in the first week of March, and the dates are listed on this slide, March 1st and March 5th at 12 noon. That'll really go into detail about what those platforms allow faculty to do and some of the advantages they have. The same with OHM, which is an online homework manager really geared toward math and some chemistry courses. There's a webinar on the Wednesday, the 3rd of March at 12 noon, which would really dive deeply into that. The focus today, what I think you'll hear a lot about from our faculty presenters, is Candela. Candela really offers an easy way for faculty to put content in an ebook format, providing a simple replacement for content that they might have otherwise gotten from proprietary publishers. It allows full editing, full faculty control over the learning content in multiple ways for students to access that content, whether in the LMS, whether through a web link that you provide, or as Tim Stooksbury is going to talk about, whether through some offline content that the SUNY Press and 64 Inc. can help facilitate. Tim?
Thank you, Mike. I guess it was last summer, SUNY Press got involved with the awesome efforts to help bring more affordable learning to the various SUNY campuses. And we created a new imprint called 64 Inc., which is helping us produce some of those courses in additional formats that can be accessed for offline use, whether that is print or downloadable ebook version. I would actually encourage you all to go back into the Ready to Adopt catalog. We currently have 58 courses that we have already produced offline print or ebook versions for. You can find all of those on our website, which is sunypress.edu. And I'm so excited to see so many participants in today's session. There's like 88 people on the line right now, guys. So if you're thinking about creating your own OER course materials, we can help you provide those offline accessible versions. And to get started in that endeavor, I would encourage you just to contact me for a brief consultation about what you're trying to do. We can walk you through the various kind of things to look for, both in the distribution agreements, the various Creative Commons licenses, and what that means for what we might be able to help produce for you. We're here to help. So it's really exciting to see so many people interested in these options. And I'll turn it back over to Chris to take us into the next part of the session.
Okay, I certainly can do that, Tim. So I'm going to tee up Josh. So Josh, you should be all set. If you have slides to share, feel free to go ahead now. Do that.
Great. Yeah, hi, I'm Josh Dickinson from Jefferson Community College, and I've been doing a lot of OERs over the first few years of the program. I did 7 by the 1st October when SUNY came out with this in August of 2017. If you Google JCC OER, we have a good little LibGuide that goes through the whole process, and any of these are available. Most of them are EPUB and PDF files. And as you can see, I have like 11. So the most recent one I did is an African-American lit. So what I sort of focused on was basically adapting an American lit book that had been adapted from the Lumen Catalog American lit book. So it's 2 removed. So there's literally like 3 things in there from the original text. And I had a lot of fun with Creative Commons image searches. And as you're seeing here, like a Trickster chapter in which I included Dave Chappelle, Dick Gregory, YouTube links, and found a ton of nice images that I could include. So been having a lot of fun with it. And I have everything from like a science fiction book, a mythology book. I'm using this right now with my class at JCC. And they enjoy the versatility of it. So I'm just going to go through a couple things on this sheet that I have. I think personally, what drew me to this was the fact that my mom took us school shopping at the JCC bookstore in the 80s, and I didn't have much of a choice. My first date was, I was a Colgate student, and I went to Syracuse with my wife to get alumni borrowing privileges because I couldn't afford the books. So it kind of bothered me. I think my students have saved around 80 grand so far. I've tallied up since 2018, because I teach a lot of these English 101 courses, or typical ones. So one of the things, I want to breeze through a couple things, is in English, we have this idea of show versus telling. One of the other kind of mantras is make it new. And Ezra Pound said that and sounded all like fresh in the early 20th century, but he actually got it from a Chinese text. And even that was disputed where that came from. So one of the things about this is showing where you get things and trying to meet student needs, and seeing yourself as authoring things, taking things that may have worked 20 years ago and renewing those and refreshing them. Lectures, ideas, and combining that with the new to meet student needs. And you can be very flexible, very current with things. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. So a couple things, as really good intro kind of covered some of this already, but I would consider, my first tip would be just take favorite assignments, take what works, take lectures, see yourself as that author. I only teach at a community college, right? And if you saw that list, you see I've taught at least 12 or 13 different courses, and these are all different OERs, and these are also OERs that are about 70 to 90% me, not 10 to 20 or 2%. And 2% is a great way to start. You can start that way with something that's almost entirely somewhere else. And so just as they mentioned, these do work well with big courses that are going to get a lot of benefit because of the savings. I also pair them with novels. My English 101, we use Dune for the science fiction novel, and we analyze a few essays about that. And we also use a book called Why Bob Dylan Matters. So they're still getting about $30 for their course materials. sharing. The idea of sharing to you is now becoming something that, when I made that African-American lit book, I think of how might someone else use this? How much stuff can I put in it? Because I can't use it, but they might. And I was teaching in my mythology class the other day, and I typed in, and maybe it's just my quirkiness of not putting tragedy first, but I put comedy versus tragedy into Google. And even in one of those little open items was my textbook came up in the Google search, not just a link. And I was like, how does that happen? That's interesting. So I don't know if that's like in the movie Young Guns, where they say, I'll make you famous, or if it's supposed to be cute, but it was just something that happened during class. And so you can kind of, these can get shared in ways you have no idea. If you're considering writing these, like Mike was mentioning too as well, you don't want to invent the wheel. You don't want to, it's a lot of work. It can be, but it doesn't have to be a lot of time. And so this quote is something I share with my students: writing offers equal opportunity harassment for all. And I just want you to think about that idea of like, it is repetitious sometimes in working within the software, but it can go quickly. It'll remember the fields that you've populated it with, and you can take entire chapters from things and credit it as you go and show that. Or you can adapt the chapters, cut them apart, take parts of them. So that's a lot of fun. It's not technically difficult at all. In fact, if you go to somewhere like Project Gutenberg, you can find a ton of stuff, but you do have to choose. You can't be like Hamlet. Hamlet's like a student, right? He doesn't shoot. Well, he is a student and he doesn't choose anything. But decide, the word itself means to cut away or to cut from. It's kind of a violent thing. What aren't you going to cover? What are you going to cover? And then look at the materials. And it's a real eye opener to look at what your own tendencies are. Blind spots, lacuna, those, I didn't realize I didn't cover this, or I didn't cover it in the right spot. And a lot of people looked at this a few years ago and didn't think it worked for them, and it does now. So I'm happy to share this 3-page kind of overview of things. The basic process, I just yanked this from JCC's website: find OER, check the license, file formats, and then putting it into the system. It's supremely easy. Now I do want to kind of plug this, because I did create this a while ago. I created it's like a 50-page document, and it's a guide to how to do this. So if you see the table of contents, and you can maybe screenshot that or whatever, but it covers like, why would you do this, how to make it interesting, managing tone, specialized courses versus the more general courses, the idea of chaos as a concept, and recursion, and how do you iterate this and work at the small scale and the big scale, and those choices and what they mean. So there's a 50-page, on the savings and the idea of authority. I'm playing on South Park here a little bit, but is it busy work? How long does it take? How to do images? All that. So that's if you just Google JCC OER, you can get to the site. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to kind of cut that short. We have the little pages for each of these in our LibGuide. So if you just do JCC OER, a lot of the schools have really good sites. You can go to Merlot and do a search. You can do a Creative Commons image search. And one of the things the SUNY Press really wants, we want to have it so that there's like no, you want the CC0 so like you can actually put it on an online platform or something. Like if you get some of these where you have to say where it's shared by, sometimes that can limit the publishability of documents. So things like Merlot, you find the good repositories that work. There's even one called Lard Bucket, where it's 100 books that got dumped, and they're legal to use. You just have to cite them properly. And they're everything from politics to British lit. And they're okay to use, EPUB, or you can download them, PDFs. So I'm kind of want you to think in terms of stereotypes and the idea of like, oh, I can't do this, or you're so specialized that you may not want to do this, because who's it gonna, if you have a very specialized class that's only taught every few years. But it's a great way to reinvigorate your interest in the process. And using OERs doesn't mean getting taken over by them. And so maybe a good way to start is to pop in a chapter, pop in a bit of a book and do that. And I'm happy to help anybody. And my information's here if you have that as a screenshot or just want to grab that. I do work as an OER mentor on my campus, and I kind of proselytize for this stuff because I believe in it. But do check out that guide if you want to see like a humanities approach to how you might do that. I guess I don't want to go over, so I want to, in the interest of time, defer to everybody else, but feel free to ask questions and share with me. I'd be happy to talk with you. Thanks.
Thanks, Joshua. You hit it right on the nose. So
Oh,
that's
good.
funny. And we'll pass the baton now to Jamie. So Jamie, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. So I'll just start with kind of sharing with everybody how I got started. Back in 2017, I didn't even know OER existed. And so I went to an informational session at the library and I was kind of hooked. I thought I'd been teaching a 300 level RN to BSN course for a few years. And I had the same kind of concerns about the commercial textbook being costly. Majority of the content wasn't being used, and they would never use the book again in the program. And so I thought, well, let me see what's out there. And there really is like not much out there in nursing. There's some in healthcare, but there was really nothing there. So it kind of left me with creating the textbook. So that's what I did. So I had a 7-week course, and so it's a fully online course. So I had 4 discussions and 3 assignments. So I decided, well, one of the assignments did not need any readings or anything like that. So I had 6 chapters in the book. So, since I had already received my Creative Commons certificates, I was familiar with licensing. When I was planning this, I did connect with the library to kind of just go over just the basics, just to make sure I was on track. Because with nursing and the content that I was covering, there was some content that I needed to include that was available at our Professional Nursing Association, but it was for purchase only. So I wanted to make sure and I had the text that I paid for. So I needed to make sure I could use that content under the fair use book. So in writing the book, I basically wrote each chapter in a Word document. I maintained accessibility. I did my research with that, and line spacing, fonts, things like that. I also, I had hyperlinks within there going to external websites. And then I also had images and videos. The videos, some of them were YouTube videos, and those also had a Creative Commons license on them. And the images, I got them mostly from Pixabay and Unsplash. So, and I used a number of tables. I was really trying to make sure that visually it was appealing. Like there wasn't just long paragraphs of content, something that kept the students kind of interested in getting the content, reading the content. And then I needed to choose the license. So I chose an attribution license, CC BY. And as much as I thought I didn't want to have other people make money off of the textbook, I could have considered a non-commercial license. But from taking the certification course, I felt, and what I've learned, it was best to make sure that the license was as open as possible. So that's what I did. I gave it a CC BY license. And peer review. So throughout the process of writing the book, I shared the chapters with our School of Nursing curriculum committee. And so that's a varied group of nurses. Some of them actually taught the course years in the past. Some never taught it. And it's basic nursing knowledge. So they knew the content. And so they gave me any feedback that I needed. And then I didn't get any, I'll jump forward a little bit. I did wind up getting a peer review from Merlot. That's one of the OER repositories. I had submitted the book to Merlot, Oasis, and OER Commons. So I was really pleased to get that peer review from Merlot. So I published the book. Actually, I'm going to share my screen now. So I worked with SUNY Publishing, SUNY OER Publishing, and We have the book here on, I'm not sure how it's now Milne Open Textbooks. It used to be Open SUNY Textbooks. So basically I would work with them. I sent them all of my Word documents and the front and back cover. Actually, I had my mom create some of the images and things like that. So it was the kind of a joint process there. Anyway, so we went back and really the review of the PDF from SUNY OER Publishing, I just did a proofreading of it to make sure that the content laid out well, because things changed, like having tables on 1 page versus 2 pages, things like that. And what else? Okay. And before I click into the book, I'll just mention that so since this book is free in the classroom, like I'll go over this in a bit, but students will get a link to this site right here and they can click on read online, or they can download it. I wanted to make sure that students knew that the book was free, because when students prepare for their classes, they go to the bookstore, see what books they need. So what worked for me was the bookstore would put go to class first. So that way students wouldn't automatically purchase this book, because you can purchase it obviously through the bookstore. If you go to their site, you can purchase it here at Amazon. But I wanted to make sure students wouldn't purchase it when they didn't need to spend that money. And that's worked out well. So what I do, like I had mentioned, I put a link to this site and then on the main page of the course, and then in other weeks of the course, I'll just put either the reading list or I can hyperlink each of the chapters. So I'll just go into the book here. So these are the 6 chapters, and these are sub chapters within the chapter. So if I have just certain chapters within each one, I can hyperlink each of those sub chapters. It works out really well. And I'll just click into one of these here. So this the content, I just try to keep it as easy to read as possible. This is one that doesn't have a ton of images because it's just a lot of content here. This was the content about the Nursing Code of Ethics that is part of the fair use that I put in here. And I give them a citation. And then and any chance I could use tables, I did, to try to make it easy visually. And then at the bottom of the page, you can see the licenses and the attribution right here. So it's a CC BY attribution and so on. And I just wanted to show, like for example, on our nursing theory chapter, I put in some images here. Actually, my mom made that image. And so just very straight to the point. And I've had really good feedback from students on that. So that's the textbook. And what's really great too is updates are quick and easy. So over here on the top right, I just click over here and I log in. And when I log in, it brings me to Lumen Learning. And even if there's like a break in a hyperlink, or I just need to update content, which is what I did a lot this past year. It's live in any courses that are going on. So it just updates immediately, which is wonderful. So if there's a problem in the class, I can take care of it right away. And then just as an aside, with a colleague, I conducted some research comparing this OER to the previous commercial textbook. And we found we had equal learning gains between both textbooks. So it was a great success. So, so that's my textbook. And, yeah, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Jamie. All right, everyone's being very good about staying on time. I love it. Pressure's on, Susan. 10 minutes.
Okay, hi there. I'll try to be 10 minutes. The presentation title said adopting, adapting, and creating. So I thought I would focus my comments about those three things. First of all, I think when you're adopting an OER, there are a couple of really important things to consider. And one is the student experience that always comes first. And then there are your own reasons for using an OER. I've done probably at least 6 or 7 OERs, and I've been using OERs for a few years now. And I've done really unscientific surveys of students and asking them what they like and what they don't like about the OERs. And generally they tell me they don't focus on cost at all. They tell me that they like that the OER coordinates easily with the course, as Jamie was showing. I have online courses. It's very easy to make a link exactly to the chapter or page that I want them to read. They like not having to search for information. They like the link. They really like videos, any kind of video, audio, multimedia. I get good feedback on those. And they like having access to the OER after the course, because more and more students are renting textbooks and then they have to, ship them back. And this way they have access to information. What they don't like, because I have not yet offered that, is not being able to get the whole thing, to print it in like a PDF format. And I've just resisted that personally, even though I think it's a good idea, only because I do have a lot of videos in there. My own reasons for moving to OERs were really to tailor the information to the course for students. The fluidity, you can add, you can edit, you can update. I've also added student samples with student permission, and that really kind of ups student engagement in the course as well. And I've had very pragmatic reasons for moving to OERs. Students have the text in their hand the first day of the term. I think a lot of students, because of costs, were delaying purchasing textbooks. This way, there is no excuse, they have it. And personally, I don't have to deal with the bookstore, so that's a big plus. But students do learn. As Jamie was saying, I've again, not done anything scientifically, but my observations about students in the OER courses are that they definitely engage more, they participate more fully in discussions, and I've actually seen them quoting the text more in their discussion posts. And this is borne out in research, and if I can share my screen. For a minute here. There have been research studies done that show a higher levels to those in courses where students use printed texts. And sometimes there's increased credit enrollment in that semester by students who are in OER courses. And the research report that I list there, Achieving the Dream, OERs at Scale, is a 2020 report. They researched 38 community colleges, over 6,000 OER course sections, and about 2,000 instructors in order to come to that conclusion. So, this is borne out by kind of large scale research. You can adapt OERs. And I've done that. I've both written my own and I've adapted and put together, kind of a compendium of a lot of different OERs. A lot of places to go to look for information. You go to Lumen. You can go to Merlot. You can go to, anything listed here. And the open textbook that I found relatively recently is that CCC OER, that is a community college site for OERs. And they have a link to a lot of resources. And then if you're in the humanities, the Libra texts is also a good source. But, if you're interested, you just go and you Google OERs and you'll get a lot of information. But the ones I've listed here are quite standard. Generally their material is very good. As I said, I've also created OERs. Probably about half of the OERs I use, I've written the bulk of on my own. And then others, as I said, I've put together information from a lot of other OER sources because there were good sources out there. And there wasn't just one source that gave me what I needed for that particular route. In the one I'm creating right now, I found a really wonderful textbook for a lit course, but it was in not a good format. So, you know, I'm creating an OER and using a lot of that textbook. I think there are decision points when you're creating an OER. You have to decide if you want to write it mostly yourself or if you want to pull from existing OERs. Do you want to make it course-based or resource-based? You know, is it simply a collection of resources that enhances what you have in a course? Or is it basically the reading that students need to do in the course? And even if it is course-based, though, I think you really need to be careful creating an OER so that it's not so idiosyncratic that it wouldn't make sense to a larger audience, because it is an OER after all, you know, and it's out there for people to use and find. And you touched on accessibility as well. And I think that's really important. You know, it needs to be in a good format that's easy to use. It needs to be accessible to all students. Videos have to have captions, etc. And I would say if you're doing this, simply plan on about 4 times more time than you initially planned for, because it does take a while. Even if you're pulling information from a lot of different sources, you're curating that information. And you know, it does take a while. I would like to also share another image, and I'll show you. Hopefully that'll load. There we go. I'll show you one that I've done. Jamie, I'm also thinking of changing this into a CC BY. I did the non-commercial, but a lot of OERs now are CC BY. And you do have to watch out with licensing. When you're looking at those OER resources, what you don't want is the Creative license, that Commons license that says no derivatives, because basically you can't do anything with it except use it the way it is. But I'll show you what this looks like. This is an intro college reading and writing course. Like Joshua, I teach a lot of introductory college writing, reading and writing, other kinds of writing. So maybe critical thinking, reading and writing. If I go into that page, which will load eventually. And then maybe we won't go into that page. But basically what you'd see is some text. You'll see images on every page. There are often videos on different pages, because again, from student feedback, students say that they really like having the videos. They will read, but the videos will re-enhance what they've read. And well, of course, I chose a page that was basically text. Sorry about that. But it is very easy to create in this format. I know Jamie talked about that. SUNY OER services are very, very helpful. And this shell makes it very easy to add images, to add links, internal links even. You can do a lot with it. And I think I have stayed in my time.
Yes.
I'm
well
also
done.
very happy to talk with people.
Well done. Okay. So our last panelist is Teresa Burke. Teresa, take it away.
Hi all, my name is Terry Burke, or Teresa Burke. I'm from Dutchess Community College. I've been in the OER realm for quite a while now. I started my OER journey back in 2014 when I joined Dutchess Community College. I was teaching a developmental biology course, and the students have a failure rate of about 35%. So 35% of our students fail this course. And the lab manual that went around with the course was outdated and it was very cookbook style. And so I'm like, I'm just going to rewrite this lab manual because it just doesn't fit my students' needs. And they're spending $100 for this combination of a textbook lab manual. So every time they fail, they have to repurchase this. So I'm like, that's crazy. That's just crazy talk to me. So I wanted to develop a lab manual that would be free for the students. So at our institution, we have what's called improvement of instruction grants. So you could say how you're going to improve the instruction for your students, and they'll give you some money like $1,000 or $2,000 to write these things. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I wrote the whole thing. I submitted it to the administration, and my president said, how much are you going to charge our students for this? I said, I'm not charging them anything. The whole reason why I did this is so they have free access to the lab manual. So if they fail the course, they don't have to purchase it again. She's like, well, you should make this an OER. I'm like, what? I don't know what OER is. All right. So she planted the seed. And then that same year, I went to Achieving the Dream conference. And I saw David Wiley. He's like my OER hero. And he was telling me like, oh, well, not me personally, but the audience, that he uses OERs and he changes the curriculum to meet his students' needs. He was even saying how he had students make examples and he put them in his OER text. It's like, wow, there's a thing like that out there. And I was introduced to OpenStax. I'm like, oh, OpenStax, they're already made textbooks. So, I jumped the gun. I looked at OpenStax. I saw one textbook that was good. It had biology in it. And then I saw another textbook that was good that had chemistry in it. And I posted both of these in Blackboard as a PDF. That was a mistake. Because when I posted the PDFs for both of those textbooks in Blackboard, the students printed them. And that was like over 1,200 pages for each textbook. And they did it in our science lab, and a teacher that wasn't really for OER, they left it in the science lab. They took it, they put it down and said, this is why I will never do OER, because look at the waste of all this material that the students did. Like, that's my bad. So I quickly contacted Alexis and Mike Daly, and that's when I was introduced to Candela, where I could actually pick and choose parts of the textbooks that I wanted from each of them, put it into Candela, and then I could actually modify what I wanted. So they had good stuff from one textbook, good stuff from another textbook, went to CDC, and CDC is an open platform. So I could take stuff from CDC and I put it all together in this one textbook. And then they helped me embed it into Blackboard. So each chapter is actually in Blackboard with an outside link as well. And in our school, they also want the students to have that physical copy. As I saw someone said in the comment that their students are hands-on and like to have a physical copy. So we had them in-house printed. So the lab manual is only $10 for our students. So it went down from $120 to $10. The textbook is free online, or they can purchase it for a small fee of about $15. So that was my first experience. I'm like, that's great. And so I'm trying to get everybody in the college to do this. So I'm like, our highest enrolled class is human biology. Maybe I could get some faculty members in our college to collaborate with me and make a Bio 103 textbook. Because we were using a Bio 103 textbook. This is for human biology for non-science majors. And it was about $150. And the kids or the students were either selecting not to buy it, or they were buying it and then never used it again because they're not science majors. They really aren't invested in the textbook too much. Even though I think biology is amazing and I would constantly read it, they don't think that. So 2 other faculty members agreed to collaborate with me, and we created a 103 textbook. And we could align the textbook with our curriculum. So you know how if you get a traditional textbook, you might use chapter 2 and then you skip to chapter 6 and then you go to chapter 11, or you only read one section of the book, the chapter. With the OER and Candela, we picked 15 chapters that aligned with our 15 labs, and we established the textbook. And then I worked with Amanda. I'll call them Amanda 1 and Amanda 2 because the last names are slipping my mind right now. Mike, I'm sure, knows the last names. Helped me with all the Creative Commons licensing, with the imaging, with the formatting. Anytime we had a problem with formatting, we contacted them, and quickly, within like minutes, Mike, I don't even know how he does it. He responds in minutes, helped us with all of that information. And now I'm working with Amanda and Tim, and we're offering our human biology textbook through the 64 Inc. and SUNY Press. And they're offering, if the students want to purchase a copy, for $28, but they also have the free online access to the textbook, and we can incorporate that textbook into our Blackboard courses. One last thing I want to talk about is the inclusivity of the ability for instructors with these textbooks. So one of my colleagues went to a conference of more inclusive language in the sciences for the LGBTQ community. And they're saying that it's simple to use inclusive language by saying something like, instead of male gonads, say the sperm producing gonads, to have inclusive language. So we can automatically change that. Instead of waiting for a textbook to come to times with inclusivity, we as instructors right now could go, as the other presenter said, it's instantaneously. We could go and make those small changes. And a small change like that really affects or influences or will have an effect on that community. Being more inclusive, imagine being representative in your text, and we can do that for our students. So that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this, because you can tailor your curriculum for your students' needs to make it more inclusive. Let's see, is there any other point I wanted to bring up? I think that's it. I talk really fast when I'm nervous, so my presentation was eased into 7 minutes.
All right, yeah, we got 13 minutes now for questions. I see there's some back and forth in the chat. I don't know if anybody wants to, Mike or Tim, you want to elaborate on some of the questions that are in the chat, or?
Yeah, I could definitely answer the question that Maureen posed about printing. And I think a good way to think about this is that the free online version, it's great for students who want to print a specific section. They can do that. And that's what we find a very common, frequent use by students who have their own printer at home or who have access to that. But some students feel more comfortable having a complete printed product. And that's why we work with various faculty members to create the whole book in those situations. When students print from the website, you get basically what that website looks like. And so you get weird page breaks, you get, big boxes for video content. And all of that stuff is fixed in the print version that 64 Inc. does. So there is for those case situations where you've got a lot of students who are going to want to have a physical copy, I would encourage you to reach out to us to talk about that. But for the case where students just want a specific section, Cantel is great for that.
So
just picking up in the chat, Chris,
yeah,
I see a back and forth with Maureen. One of the things that I think Terry Burke at Dutchess was talking about was by using an editing platform like Candela, she was able to really zero in and specifically locate in ways similar to that Susan Oakes or JB Murphy were talking about, the content that her students really needed. And then if they needed a print or an offline version, it was significantly less pages than giving them the entire textbook from OpenStax, which she had done originally.
Also true.
Are there any, and yes, we will include the chat with the recording, and everyone will get an email with both. I'll put the chat. Usually what I do is I'll put the chat without names in the description of the YouTube or video where we upload the video. So that's what I'll do. Any other questions? Anybody want to jump in with their mic and ask a question? I don't see any others in the chat that haven't been addressed. If that's not the case, please either repost in the chat or just jump in with your mic.
I had a question. My name's Michelle Wiltsey, and I teach at Hudson Valley Community College, and I teach accounting. And I don't see a lot of accounting related, I see business related courses, but not a lot of accounting related ones. Are there certain sites, like somebody was saying, if you teach in humanities, you should go here? Are there certain sites that maybe I'm overlooking and dismissing the fact that there's not something already recreated for, or created, I should say, not recreated, that I could use for my accounting classes?
Yeah,
I might
thanks.
have a quick tip. This is Josh. Just quickly, if you do like a PDF at the end of your search, sometimes you can Google and find those. Some of the state sites, especially at West, used to have really good science, nursing. A couple of them get shut down, like Florida, where they just ceased to pay for it. But if you get into those state system sites, sometimes there's very good materials in business sciences or even the accounting. I've seen the workbooks and things. Sometimes the professors digitize those, and the trick is the software sometimes hangs that up because it showing the math sometimes. But I guess you just use Excel. So you guys aren't like calculus. You can do it. Yeah, but look in those state sites. In Minnesota's another one. Sometimes you get into those.
So I just put a link in the chat, Michelle. You might be interested. This is a new course that was launched, written and developed actually by a couple SUNY faculty in cooperation with Lumen Learning. It's available in our catalog. It's financial accounting. It's in a platform that I mentioned earlier at the top of the call, Online Homework Manager. So it does some of those workbook exercises that I know accounting faculty especially appreciate. There will be another accounting course coming out at the end of this semester. I believe that's business accounting. So definitely encourage you to take a look at those. I will also, readily acknowledge, as my colleague Tony DeFranco will, that accounting is one of the disciplines that there's just not yet a lot of OER material. There certainly is textual material about accounting, but those really kind of exercise-driven courses or course materials that I know accounting faculty use across SUNY have not yet, with the exception of the one that I just mentioned, been made available in an open license format.
And is that a new one, Mike? Because when I looked into OER a couple of years ago, there wasn't even a financial accounting.
Yeah,
So has that been launched fairly recently?
It was launched last November. So,
okay.
And certainly happy to talk with you offline. We can get you set up with a test account and a tutorial. Love to get your feedback on it.
Great. And then somebody else mentioned just recently about something they said, I already had the Creative Commons certificates. And I'm sorry, but that doesn't mean anything to me, but I'm sure you need it. So could somebody speak to what that means?
Yeah, you don't need a Creative Commons certificate at all. The Creative Commons, which is an international organization, does offer various levels of certification for people that are interested in doing a much deeper dive into Creative Commons licenses. They're not a requirement or kind of an ID card to show before you can use open educational resources. They're kind of a professional development opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
I saw a question from Rodney there about additional sessions or ways to start the process with your office. I assume OER. The links, some of the links on here will be helpful. What I was doing actually, when Mike was just talking now, was opening them up so I could share them in the chat. Again, you're all going to get this slide deck, but we'll try to get them in the chat before the session ends.
Chris, I see in the chat that Ananta Adhikari has raised their hand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ananta, do you have a question?
You have to unmute yourself there.
Sorry, I'm sorry, but I just found out. I'm Ananta Adhikari. I'm an assistant professor here at SUNY at Postdam. Actually, I was not aware of this OER. It's very good platforms. I have seen that many students are struggling for the textbook and the other materials. It's very good. Now, when I look into the OER website of SUNY, under SUNY, I don't see any physics. I'm a physics professor. Do you guys know any SUNY related textbooks we have in the OER or not? Is there any other options that I can look at? That's my one SUNY OER website. Are these books are available for everybody in the United States? Everybody can use that one, or just that campus only?
It's a great question. I'll work backwards. To your first question, everything that you see at oer.suny.edu is openly licensed, which means that anybody with access to the internet can click on those resources and really use the textual information, the videos that are embedded, some of the interactives. What SUNY faculty and students have available to them at no cost is access to the platforms in which that content resides outside of the web. And those platforms specifically are Candela, the Online Homework Manager, OHM, or Waymaker, as well as OLI. So that's kind of the added advantage. That platform access gives faculty their own version of the course. So instead of just linking kind of to a website, when you adopt, say, the accounting course I just talked about earlier, Michelle at Hudson Valley will get her own version of the course that she can customize, she can tailor, and only her and her students have access to if she chooses. To your second question about physics, I'm going to ask my colleague Tony DeFranco to turn his microphone on. There is a current project that some University of Buffalo faculty are working on with our partners at Carnegie Mellon OLI to develop Physics 1, specifically aimed at attrition in that course by underrepresented minority students. So Tony, if you want to talk about that a little bit, I know they're still looking for some contributors to that content.
They are, Physics 1 should be available anytime within the next several days on the oer.suny.edu catalog. Physics 2 is coming out very soon. As Mike mentioned, they are always looking for physics contributors. So if anyone is interested, feel free to contact Mike or me or oer@suny.edu, and we'd be more than happy to connect you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's see here. I want to back up a bit to Jesus's comment.
Yes.
He says, I love OERs. I see all the advantages. I wish we would also focus on a broader conversation about zero cost materials for students. This could include library resources. I see many universities that allow students to search for OER courses in their course catalogs, but not for zero materials costs that might be OERs or not. I wish we could change this.
Jesus, that's a great and good to, thanks for joining us today on this webinar. Good to see you as always. I think it's a great conversation. You know, OER, as we try to assess with SUNY OER services, it may be a choice for some SUNY faculty. For other SUNY faculty, it may not be the choice that they make, and that's entirely fine. What I think is also an opportunity in that conversation as we talk with faculty or as you talk with faculty is to remind them of some of the resources that might already exist on your campus, especially in libraries. And we see a lot of faculty who find maybe 75% or 65% or 90% of their content available in OER. And then we can steer them back to our libraries and say, you know, your library has this streaming media platform, or your library subscribes to this journal, which has some really relevant case studies or articles that are particular to your course. So certainly at SUNY OER Services, we're really built on the back of a lot of SUNY libraries and librarians and the efforts that they've made to reintroduce faculty to some of the existing resources that are paid for and available for students is of utmost importance. There are a few SUNY campuses, I think the number's at 4 or 5 now, where students can actively filter to a low cost or an affordable cost course material designator. That's certainly a growing trend both within SUNY and nationally. And I think it does broaden the conversation for students. When we talk with students and we hear national conversations with students, students, no fault of their own, really don't understand OER. If you just label a course OER, they're not quite sure what that means. If you say that course is low cost or a affordable cost, or the cost is under $30, students know exactly what you're talking about. So certainly there's room for a deeper conversation, and welcome you to join me in that. Yeah, I can do that for you, Jesus.
And then there's Michael's question about how are the resources on more vocationally oriented courses, interested in jewelry and gemology. And so we've developed our own course contents, and much of it can be recorded, but curious to know what resources are out there. There are many online non-academic resources out there, and I've included them as well in my current courses.
Yeah, I'll take this one too, and Tony, feel free to jump in as well. The vocational it's certainly interesting, of growing interest, I know, in SUNY as we seek to engage students across the sector and across needs. Much of the vocational openly licensed content was developed, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, in a federally funded grant called the Skills Grant, which was aimed at some high need industry areas. Those are still available and openly licensed. Most recently, that grant was kind of reinitiated. I believe last year, SUNY applied for that federal grant through the Department of Labor. SUNY was awarded some money, and the SUNY Workforce Development Team is engaging with campuses right now on creating content for some specific areas. I'm not quite sure what those areas are. I know welding is one of them, advanced manufacturing is another. But the interesting thing with federal grants, especially from the Department of Labor, Department of Ed, and Department of Health, I think are the three big ones right now. They require materials created under the fundings of those grants to be openly licensed. So we're starting to see a wider exposure of open licenses and how materials are created, especially for public consumption. So specifically to gemology and some of the courses you're talking about, I would invite you to just email oer@suny.edu with some specific questions and content questions that you have, and myself or Tony will happen to be answer that email or get back to you with a time to talk more in depth.
Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I just want to thank our panelists, especially for taking the time out today to talk to everybody. And thank you all for coming. And like I said, as soon as we get this uploaded, we'll get you the materials that were presented today, and we'll get you the recording as well. And I think your first stop is Tony and Mike at OER Services are always a good stop. And then if you have any questions about SUNY Press or 64 Inc., reach out to Tim. And have a great weekend, everyone.
And Chris, I know you got to run. If you want to turn it over to me, feel free.
Sure.
I've got a few minutes, so if people want to hang on and have a extended conversation, I'll just bill you by the minute. I'm just kidding.
I have to run too, Mike. So if anything,
Thanks, Tim.
push it my way.